Reverend Frank Chikane, who is on the initiators and leaders of the Defend Our Democracy campaign, says he has no issue with former President Jacob Zuma getting a presidential pardon if he applies for it, but he must first admit to his mistakes. It comes after former President Jacob Zuma was sentenced on Wednesday. Reverend Frank Chikane now joins us to discuss a little bit further. Reverend Frank Chikane, thank you for joining us. When we're looking at, as a leader, the issues of accountability are synonymous. Now, we're looking at the processes, perhaps in applying for pardon. Ultimately, also involves the Department of Justice, who will assess the guidelines and then perhaps make recommendations to the president, who will then decide from there on too. But we're looking at the degree of difficulty associated with granting such a pardon. How easy is it to obtain? What are your thoughts on that possibility for former President Jacob Zuma?
Yeah, let me just say thank you very much for inviting me to your program and your those who are watching it. Let me just say, ma'am, that on this matter, I can't speak on behalf of Defend Our Democracy campaign, because the issue of pardon has not arisen at that level. At that level, the discussion is about making sure that no one acts above the law and that all of us are subject to the Constitution and the laws of this country. I think we should keep that at that level. And it doesn't matter who it is, the status of a person shouldn't matter. Ordinary people go through that process, and therefore we should accept that. And that's the Defend Our Democracy campaign. On the issue of a pardon, I was asked by the Business Day journalist, because they know I've been in the presidency, and said, what do you think about a pardon? Now, I must say, pardons are not easy, especially for political purposes. Some of the cases we dealt with were very difficult. I won't refer to that at this stage because they involve people. Then there are ordinary people who need pardon for one reason or another. And the presidency works with the Justice Department. The Justice Department has got regulations that guide officials before they make a recommendation. But the request for the pardon must come from the person who's affected. It's not something that you just decide and say, I'm going to do it. So in a sense, we are putting the cart before the horse. If a former president asked for a pardon, then it would have to be dealt with following all the processes that go with it. What I indicated when I was interviewed earlier was that a pardon works easier when a person says, I made a mistake, or I misjudged the situation, or, and this thing won't happen again. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Then you are likely to be pardoned, which is different from the US one that I don't understand, where the president pardons people, his friends, pardoned his friends, and irrespective of, I don't understand that. But in any way, that's the United States. In South Africa, we don't use a lot of pardons. So the president of the country is the one who would have to make that decision. But the matter is not before, as far as I know, before us. And if it comes, I'm sure it will be considered the way in which they normally do it.
And I think, as you're alluding to the fact that if pardoning is on the cards, the individual in question would need to then demonstrate remorse and ultimately take responsibility as well for that. So I think, without speculating too further, let's perhaps move on to the protests that are happening, in former President Jacob Zuma's name. I'm wondering about what is transpiring on that front. Is this going to help or damage his case going forward? I mean, obviously, looking at the courts, considering the dynamics that are unfolding, if they do lessen his sentence or rescind, I mean, can they be accused of giving into threats of intimidation? How exactly does the judiciary stand on that front?
No, you see, we must separate protest from the judiciary. The point is that the judiciary acts independent. It won't act based on politics and protests and etc. And the rulings of the judiciary have to be complied with. That's why earlier this week, they had to be complied with, even when there were people there, even people who were armed there, even people who were ready to fight to say that the former president will not go to jail. Now, that doesn't work. In a constitutional state, you can't have a situation where somebody violates the law and others campaign and say that person should not go to jail. Then others as well would campaign. I think where the Defend Our Democracy campaign comes in, it's that people must be treated as equals. The young person who bullied somebody at school and that person committed suicide and got arrested, failed to appear in court, was sent to jail for failing to appear in court. So if it can be done with an ordinary person who has nobody to protest on her behalf, it can be fair that if it's somebody at a higher level, that person should not face the same consequences. So I think that most of the people who are doing this are misinformed. They are being told that procedures were not followed, the courts didn't do this or do that. For the Defend Our Democracy campaign, it's whether it is possible for any South African who is in a court or a commission to stand up and walk away and say, I'm not coming. Well, once you do that, you open yourself to be charged. You open yourself to be found guilty for, not complying with the court processes. So I think people who are protesting may love him, and I think they are right. If you love him and you want protest in support of him, you can do that, but don't do it outside the law, because it's the same Defend Our Democracy process. You can't act outside the law. You can't break the COVID protocols and say, I'm angry. You can't go and ban people's cars and say, I'm angry. I mean, why would you ban an ordinary person's car? You can't go and ban trucks with goods, because those people have nothing to do with this story about the former president going to jail. It's completely counter-revolutionary in my view, if you have to use that language. It's like people getting angry about water or next to, N12, and they go to the street and kill somebody in a car who has nothing to do with water. And anybody who's politically sus would know where to direct their anger and say, we are angry about this, but we're going to protest in a way that does not affect ordinary people. I think that is important here.
Reverend Frank Chikane, I think in the interest of time, just to wrap up the conversation, I mean, this week we saw the Joburg Mayor, Jeff Magoba, succumbing to COVID-19 complications. I'm wondering, as a cadre, as a politician, what has your interaction been with him over the years? How are you going to remember him?
Well, I've known him for a long time. Obviously, he was younger than me in the struggle for liberation. I've seen him growing into the municipal politics and development there. And I only worked closer to him when I became chair of City Power, because he was in the finance department. And I mean, he's made his contribution, and it's a tragedy that he had to die the way he has died. I mean, you'll remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, one thing I will remember about him is that he was in the streets with the police and encouraging people to comply, make sure they don't die. because of this pandemic, and he risked his life at that stage. Actually, that's a stage at which I thought he would contract this virus, and he didn't at that time. And with this third wave, which is really brutal, I mean, the first and second never reached my family. This one reached my family. So it's really challenging, and it's a pity we have lost him. He shouldn't have died the way he has died. And we express our condolences to the family and his children, and condolences to the people of the city of Johannesburg and the country.
Reverend Frank Chikane, thank you very much for your time. Again, Reverend Frank Chikane is one of the initiators and leaders of the Defend Our Democracy, just chatting about the issues of pardoning former President Jacob Zuma. Is it on the cards for him? Also paying homage and respects to the late Joburg mayor, obviously succumbed to COVID-19 complications. That was Jeff Makubo.